And, grew up, I am a gay man, and a lot of people say, oh, it must have been so hard being gay, especially in, a more conservative town. We're a highly Republican area of New Hampshire in general is very Republican. I didn't have those problems. I had great times in school. I was the life of the party. Like, I started using cocaine for the cachet of it, and then I never did heroin, though, because it goes back to, again, those childhood memories. Like, I remember New York City in the late 70s, early 80s, and identified, and I knew from friends that one time you have that high, you're always chasing it.
Right.
And so she said something once that really hit it for me, and I think it's very relatable to other people struggling with addiction. It goes, if I made a mistake, I was the mistake.
Green lights and blue skies are on their way. Yeah, they're on their way.
Welcome to Crosstalk, the #1 recovery podcast in all of the universe. I'm coming to you from South Florida. We're here today. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Let us know, how you're feeling. If you have any questions for us, what you like, what you don't like, we want to hear it. And today I have an amazing guest. His name is Steve, and I don't know if you want me to say Steven.
No, Steve. But I answer to just about anything.
So I'm really excited. I've heard bits and pieces of his story, so I'm excited for him to share it with you all today. Welcome.
Perfect. Welcome. Thank you for having me. And the energy is feeling good today. We're going to hopefully get some good things out on the table about my experience, strength, and hope, and see how we can help people understand that this disease touches all facets of the community and how important community is. And that's one of the things when you were talking about experience, like before doing an event like this, you always, so much unravels in your head. And so if I'm a little jumbled around, that's why I love the format of Crosstalk. It's like, I told them in advance they can jab me on anything, so it should be a spirited conversation.
Oh, I'm excited. And we will.
That's ominous. Can I escape?
We'll be nice then.
Good.
So, in the spirit of what we do and being nice. Yeah. But
nice is overrated.
Yeah.
I can like a little salty. And spicy too.
Me too.
See, relatability.
Yeah, exactly. So, what we like to do here is just kind of start with a little bit about yourself, what it was like growing up, where you're from, what it looked like, and then how it unraveled, what happened.
The unraveling and then the rebuilding.
Yes.
That's the exciting part, So I call myself like a phoenix rising from the ashes of my life, because as a good consummate alcoholic and garbage head, I burnt it down pretty well, but I've rebuilt something that I'm very proud of, and it takes work on a daily basis. But it all started, and you won't hear it from the accent apparently, but I am a native Bostonian, or an hour out of Boston, from a town called Nashua, New Hampshire. I affectionately called it nausea when I was there, but I've grown to love it in the rearview mirror. But, I was born early 70s. I was the surprise child in my family. There was 2 children back to back, 16, 17 months apart, and then big 7-year gap, and then here comes Steve. I think I was a byproduct of a good night out and a lot of Chardonnay. So big shock, I turned into an alcoholic. But it really, that age gap, I think, added a lot of the dynamic in my family that kind of added to what I believe was the precursors of alcoholism. Like, there was a lot of separation from, there was a family unit that was kind of already established, and then me. So I always felt on the outside, like they're dealing with, teenage issues. I'm still a child, like, hello, look at me, I'm over here. And I always like to identify as a child of an alcoholic. And I think that's pivotal in my story, because I always thought I'd never turn into my mother. And I blew the doors off, like, again, being an overachiever, but it was so quintessentially, there was so much tension surrounded by keeping the facade that everything's good. We're the wholesome little family. Look at the house on the street, and those masks that so many alcoholics can relate to, or addicts can identify as, like, just put one on, make everything, as long as no one knows what's going on behind closed doors, we're good, and then we'll deal with our stuff behind the scenes. But as getting sober and looking kind of inward, just how much of an inside job this was, like realizing now how much that early start like cascaded through all of my life and still does to this day. And especially around perceptions of if people think that I'm not understanding a situation or I'm not really that intelligent about something, I will come back on the defense really quickly, because it harkened back to when I'd hear from my father, like, oh, your mother's napping or lying down. It's like, no, mom's passed out. You know,
Right.
like,
Right.
I'm 6, but I know what's going on here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that uncertainty permeated so much my drinking career, because I wanted to fill a void, at least what I thought in my armchair psychology. But life was generally pretty happy. I mean, with the exception, because I learned to work with the masks of that, and grew up. I am a gay man, and a lot of people say, "Oh, it must have been so hard being gay," especially in a more conservative town, we're highly Republican area of New Hampshire, and New Hampshire in general is very Republican. I didn't have those problems. I had great times in school. I was the life of the party. I mean, maybe it was overcompensating, but I knew how to turn it up pretty well. And I was friends with everybody, jock to geek. I was all
Right.
over.
I can relate to that
Yeah.
too. So you were open from a young age, like, or did you not talk about it, but it was there, you knew it?
It was part of the lexicon of like, keep your mouth shut across the board. So I was kind of almost got into a negotiated truce. Like, I think my family knew I was gay, but it was like, if I'm going to keep the secret about mom's drinking, you're not going to push the envelope about my sexuality. So it was kind of, we came to an agreement, like, if we don't talk about it, it's not a reality, So it was another
British
wonderful
way.
coping skill, and the annals of the family dynamic. Which again, that's where coming into a program of recovery, whatever iteration it might be for anyone, getting the stuff out on the table. Now, like we were talking before going on camera about being a straight shooter. My propensity of dealing with bullshit has become minuscule. Like, if you're going to come at me, we never have to agree on anything, but if we agree that we're authentically stand behind whatever we believe, we're good. You think you're going to back end or bullshit me, I'll crucify you.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I just don't.
In my subtle, delightful way.
Right.
And I'll add a little sparkle around it
you'll
too.
probably-
But you'll know that I've arrived.
You're probably nicer about it than I am. I'm just like, bullshit.
Well, I have been equated to being a pit bull. So, like, once I lock in, it takes a lot to unclench those jaws.
Okay, I'm glad I'm on your good side.
Yeah, well, it takes a lot to. My trigger has become much less. Like, I used to be like, things would blow the wrong way, and it got back to that, like, hurt people. And I walked around like an open sore as my life progressed and the alcoholism took hold. Because I started drinking early, about 12. The experimentation. Let's steal a little out of the family closet. Oh, maybe some friends have a little weed or something, and it was the thrill of it. And again, it's almost cascaded through my life. It's always the chase, like, oh, I can get away with it, or oh, no one's gonna know, or again, with that kind of cone of silence in my family, as it started to become more evident that I was drinking as a teenager, I didn't have really repercussions, because it was like, okay, you put up with enough, we'll let this slide. Like, the bogey was set, like, just get C's and don't drink and drive. Other than that, don't worry about it. So the bar was not set too high. It was like, okay, I'll run with that one, and ran a couple of holes through that boundary or lack thereof. And but I had the quintessential growing up. There was disappointments, there was loves, there was attempts at heterosexuality. Weren't too successful, but I tried. But that's another thing that now, to where I have arrived at, 52-year-old man, like, I have become so comfortable in my own skin. Like, I look back at the 12-year-old, the 22-year-old, the 32-year-old, just how much those iterations needed to go through every step, every misstep, every jackpot to get to where I am today. So you will see I've turned into that quintessential grateful recovering alcoholic. That phrase nauseated me when I first came into the rooms, and I flirted with the rooms for a good 3 years before I got sober. And I was saying I used to bring my water bottle full of vodka they knew. And someone said to me, they're like, AA works better if you don't drink. And that took a little while for me to catch that message. But now it's just, Juan Valdez and coffee.
Right.
But, or Pellegrino. Those are my two big vices. But at least I'm not spending a lot on a 8-ball of Coke and a gallon of
Right.
Vodka.
Well, much cheaper addiction, right?
Well, I can backfill with a couple of other shopping excursions.
Me too. Me too. So, dabbling in alcohol and maybe some light drug use.
Yep. Just
no consequences. Kind of looks like the way I went through my high school life. And then did you graduate with C's? Were you you said you're an overachiever. What did that look like?
Actually, it was funny. It was because the bar was set so low. It was kind of like, I got through high school moderately, regular kind of graduation, probably, B minuses. Took a year off and went to Colorado to find myself. Lived with my older sister, which there was some codependency there, and there's a family dynamic that I'm glad I've found the rooms. I think more people can have benefits of 12-step, or not even if it's for drugs or alcohol, but there's a lot of healing that still needs to go on there. But in that first year, out of high school, I decided when it was like, I can either stay and be mediocre or go and excel. And my parents gave me the opportunity to excel. They were like, you got a year to find yourself. If not, you're paying for college yourself. And my ass got on a plane real quick when that checkbook was about to close up. And I'm like, I'm going to school. And because they didn't put a lot of pressure, I put the pressure on myself. And that's kind of, something that was good, and it helped me excel in college. Came back to Boston and went to Northeastern University and graduated with degrees in international business and finance, and started my career right off the bat, working for a major mutual fund and investment company, and then kind of grew through the ranks there and had that tenacity to really kind of jump in and do things, and really jumped the ladder pretty quickly, and then moved on to some other boutique style type of firms that monetarily I did very well because of private equity and things of that nature. So that kind of fueled even more of my drinking, because I got that lofty head, like, well, I'm untouchable because I make them money. And I had several jackpots throughout my career, and I was offered treatment, and I always thought the more life of the party I was, the more insulated I was. And I was, one time I left a audience of several hundred people just waiting on stage while I was trying to put myself together, because I had gone out way too hard the night before, and my bosses had to come to Jesus and offered me a job, or offered to continue my job if I went to treatment. And I was like, no, I'm fine. And they suspended me for a few weeks, but brought me back because I had a skill set. Like, I knew how to develop a skill set that could protect. It was almost like an insurance policy. And then in that particular, I got out of that jackpot, and it's almost like I wanted to test the boundaries more. It's like, well, I'm going to see if I can push this a little bit further. And then I just got to the point, especially having some resources at my disposal, because by that point my parents had passed, and that was kind of a precipitating event, because my father had Alzheimer's about 8 years before he passed away. And that, when I look at that crescendo, it was kind of like, if that's going to happen to me, I predestined that was going to be my lot in life, and I used that to light the fire of addiction that was already there. And from that first drink I had at 12, I knew that feeling of escape was in there, and every time I drank thereafter, I drank alcoholically. So I don't do anything moderate, and as I said before we started taping, subtle is not my forte. And my drinking wasn't that way. Like, it was always a great party for a lot of times. There was a lot of, then it started to turn gray, and then it got blacker and blacker. And to the last several years, when we talk about the isolation taking hold, I see every milestone, and treatment was such a discovery point for me that continues to this day. I got sober. I'm about 9.5 years sober, got sober in September of 2014. And I was pretty resistant, but I was desperate. That gift of desperation, it's one of the most beautiful things in the world.
And it's really, I love that you talk about how successful you are. There's so many people, and there are executive programs across the United States, but a lot of people sometimes will say to me, like, oh, well, wealthy people don't have these problems. And I'm like, actually,
I've got to say,
you
that's one of
know,
the biggest misnomers. And I've got to say,
yeah.
it's probably harder for people with some bucks to get sober because you can mask a hell of a lot of stuff.
Well, right. Actually, it's true. And I still have a lot of wealthy friends in active addiction because they can really buy themselves out of their consequences and, manage their addiction for longer and, decide that that's okay for them.
No, and there's a lot of Klingons too that will co-sign your bullshit, frankly.
Oh, totally. Listen,
Sorry if I'm getting a
you're
little mouthy here, but
no, but it's true. Like
I speak the truth.
If you're gonna, it's hard to confront someone who's generously either paying bills of yours or taking you out all the time or kind of footing a bill or keeping you in a position that, you wouldn't be able to have unless they were doing it. So usually those people aren't the ones to be like, well, I think you need help, because if you get help, then our relationship might change.
Yeah, they can see the handwriting on the wall. They'll probably be out the door. And I gotta say, that's one of the things when I was thinking about coming to this opportunity. I was thinking about a therapist who was so, God, he really just shook me to the core, and it was fantastic because he had been in recovery himself, and he shared his recovery journey with me. And I had some dear friends who were like family to me say, oh, go see Ray, and I go, well, I'm just for anxiety, and we all knew, like,
Right.
I was the worst kept secret about my alcoholism. Everyone else knew, but I didn't, or I knew, but I didn't want to admit it. And
or let go of it, right?
I thought it was part of my identity.
I protected my addictions like I would have fought you about it. I probably did,
I can see you have some fight in you. Don't you wish you had some tapes to play back?
So, it's funny because when I first got sober, they were like, were you a blackout drunk? And I was like, no. And then I talked to some people who my end of days, I call it, the end of my run, kind of. And I heard stories that I was like, that was me. And now I can't even fathom behaving like that. I can't even fathom, like, just speaking to someone like that or putting myself into situations that are deadly, really,
Well, it's amazing. And, these hallmarks in your path. There was one 10 years before I got sober. I still, to this day, it was so vivid, and it makes you think. I'd moved slightly out of downtown Boston. I'd always lived in downtown Boston, and before I bought something, I thought, I'll try living out in Newton or or outside, 10 minutes outside
because
of
it's
Boston.
the location, right?
Yeah, I thought,
it's not you.
It's not, I'll just move out and see if I like it out here. And I went into town for a very nice dinner, and I had a group of friends who, we could go from the Ritz to the Ramada. It was kind of a quintessential. We'd go to dinners, and then we'd end up in real shady places all over the world. It was a lot of fun, actually. But we went to this wonderful dinner, all dressed to the nines, and I'm like, I remember consciously saying, two's the maximum, you've got to drive. And the night turned into a blackout. I drove home, which I would have been driving down Sturrow Drive. For anyone who knows Boston, it's right along the river. It's very treacherous, sober, let alone in a blackout with two pop tires. And so the next morning I leave to drive back to work, and I see the tires, and all I could think of is like, I have to have killed someone. And I went back into my living room and turned the TV on, thinking that there's got to be a newscast looking for a black Maxima, pop tires, and that didn't stop me. Like, that shows, like, how, to me, and this is 10 years before I got sober, just how many of those jackpots I needed to go through. And I mean, to the grace of God, I did not kill anyone.
Same.
Yeah.
I mean, I drove not only on alcohol, but other substances, and some were, slightly hallucinogenic. And the fact that I haven't killed someone or even got into a bad accident or hurt myself, sometimes, when you get to your destination, you're like, how did I get here?
Yeah. You're like, there should be some remembrance of intersections.
Like zero.
Yeah.
And I just, thinking about that now, I'm like, oh my God, how did I but that's why I can believe in a higher power, which I happen to call God. But, I that was so easy for me to take on the belief of a higher power, because I was like, there's no way I should be dead 10 times over or in, maximum security penitentiary, So tell me, you say you're an alcoholic and there were other substances as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you don't really discriminate?
No, I'm 100% a garbage head. Anything that got me out of reality. I mean, like I started using cocaine for the cachet of it, and then I never did heroin though, because it goes back to, again, those childhood memories. Like I remember New York City in the late 70s, early 80s, and I identified, and I knew from friends that one time you have that high, you're always chasing it.
Right.
And so that was the only thing I was scared of. But Molly, ecstasy, I mean, God, stuff that I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I've if it could be ground up and snorted, I'd throw it up there. But I always went back to alcohol.
Right.
And a lot of that was always to fuel being able to stay up longer to drink. And I always, at first, prided myself like I could drink any football player under the table and look at him, rah, rah. And then it became pathetic, but it took me, again, good 20 years to see how pathetic it was. And it was when I had to turn inward, because I couldn't know the Jekyll and Hyde. I would leave and I'd be like, I didn't know what was going to happen, if I was going to end up in a crack house, someone trying to steal something from me, or just in the streets of Boston or New York, or I was traveling a lot at that time, because I ended up leaving my job because it was impeding my drinking.
Right, of course.
Like, how dare I stop from growing my career? And
Right.
It was funny because we had just moved in. Those pinnacles that you set as a kid, like, I want one of the best offices in Boston. I got it. I was in this wonderful tower, beautiful, like, view. I was really, what quintessentially would be, I had the world by the balls.
Yeah.
And I was so vacant. And I remember the day I was getting off a conference call and I had one of those Plantronic headsets on. I put it down. I go, I think I'm going to go home early. And I knew in my gut I was not coming back, because I was like, that bottle. And I gave myself some illusion, like, oh, I'm going to do charity work and I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And my charity work was me sitting on my couch sucking on a bottle of Grey Goose. Right. I was like, wow, that's in tortilla, like the Tortillas pizza rolls. I can't even eat them to this day.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I think I have some in my freezer.
Well, they can stay there.
I have kids that come over, so I have to have stuff for them. But I also kind of like them.
Okay.
So tell me, first of all, that environment, I had a lot of friends who were investment bankers. I don't know if private equity is similar. I'm definitely not a financial. I wish I was. But, I know that all that pressure can sometimes even like fuel the addiction,
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things for me, I traveled a lot, so I could mask a lot. And, expense account. Whew, Lord, alcoholic with an expense account. That's, I think I still have an amends to make on that front. Thanks for reminding me. But, it was one of the things where, I was kind of almost like an island to myself. I dealt with a lot of advisors and different people, independent business people. So it was always like they were going through stress, and if they went out, they had a couple extra, I'd have a couple extra. And then when I kind of changed, I went for a title, and I kind of got slotted under someone who used to be my colleague. So I always felt like I was less than. Like, it took me back to childhood when I was trying to mask, like, well, no, I don't want anyone to know that my mom's drunk. So it was like I felt less than. Like, for a long time I had been like, God, look at me, I'm overachiever. And then I had a reset that didn't sit well with me. And then the drinking escalated, the health concerns with my parents, and really that the watching my father was a key component to me, because I checked out. I'm like, this is my lot. He got diagnosed at 62 with Alzheimer's, was in care by mid 60s for 8 years. And I'm like, if this is going to be my lot in life, I might as well light fire to this. And I did, and
that's young too.
Oh yeah,
God.
absolutely. And
I always look at that disease as, a progressed, like further down in life, not someone in their late 50s, early 60s. So that
Absolutely.
must have been really tough, and I'm sorry.
It was tough, but in hindsight, one of those things, like the greatest gift I think I've had is being there for both my parents during their illness. So even if I was, full blown alcoholic on a rampage, I always seemed to be sober when they needed me. And it came to it felt like a conclusion of a circle. Like even with all the dysfunction and turmoil, I had a moment with my mother right before she passed, and she's like, she knew that she owed myself, and my brother was in the room at the time, and she goes, "Do you forgive me?" And it was that 10-minute conversation. I'm sorry, I get a little emotional, but we resolved 40 years of issues with that one conversation, because they brought her out of like kind of a morphine-induced coma. And it was beautiful. But I still had to go through my own journey. And, when I look at the fact of, I was living to die those last couple of years, and I left the country to go kill myself in Greece. We were talking about Greece. I went to Santorini, and I was going to be, here comes the dramatic part again. It was my birthday. It was my 42nd birthday, and I was going to Athens, and I was like going to Santorini. I'm like, going off the cliff.
My God.
I want it to be, big and grand. And someone...
When your mom asked you that question, what'd you say to her? You were with your brother?
Yep.
What was that? What does that conversation look like?
Oh, it was beautiful. It really was, because it was in those few words, it encapsulated so many years of issues and secrets and just turmoil, and it just evaporated by just being able to say yes. And it was one of the most beautiful things ever. Right? It sounds bizarre to say.
And you both said yes?
Yeah. Yep. And it was, and I've got to say that's my brother. I'm a little bit more emotional and high spirited, I think. My brother's pretty even keeled. It was one of those bonding moments that, there is the emotional connection when losing a parent is something that, no matter what age it happens, it makes you feel like an orphan. And, but being able to get that closure, if that had not happened, I don't know if this, if I would even want to invest in trying to save my own life, and or like putting the proper perspective. A dear friend that both you and I know says, I suffer from a disease of perception. And just because I've gotten sober does not mean that perception's gotten any better. It's gotten a little bit more focused. And I realize that, especially and I prescribe to any form of recovery. It doesn't have to just be AA, but AA has saved my life. And I know we're not supposed to expound virtues, but working the steps, specifically the third step for me. And when I came in, I believed in God, but I hated God. I was pissed. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm not able to say that.
Oh, no, you could say that.
I'm good. Pissed.
We've had people say way worse, trust me.
You might give me license for some more.
That's okay.
But, it was funny because my first sponsor said to me, he goes, you're not pissed at God. You're pissed at what you think others' interpretation of what God thinks of you. He goes, we got to cut out the middleman. We got to do some direct connecting. And I was
love
like,
that.
I was like, and he was a ball buster. I remember once I was getting a root canal. I was going to be 15 minutes late to an appointment with him. He goes, don't come. If this isn't priority, not coming.
I've said that to people, and they then fire me or whatever you call it in the biz.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, okay, what can I do? But once a girl came all the way here and she wasn't prepared. She didn't bring a notebook. She didn't bring her book. I was like, what's the point? Why are you? What is this?
Yeah.
But not to deter anybody, but this is a program about. If you work certain 12-step fellowships, and I can't speak for all of them, but I also subscribe to the same program that you do. I do say the word AA, and AA itself actually promotes itself on television. Yeah. So just saying. But, it is about showing up and being there for someone else, but also being there for yourself. Awesome. And yes, the perspective, but also, being prepared. I remember my sponsor is actually, she was a different approach. She's very kind and loving. We both know her, and you just recently watched her interview, and she kind of let a lot of things slide. So I don't know how I became so tough. But the toughness of my treatment center really helped me. So I kind of think that you need both.
Well, and it's funny. I was talking to someone about my treatment experience because when I came back from Greece, it was actually
What happened? Santorini didn't make you want to...
No, I got a call from someone very significant in my life who's in the program, and I said, I'm not coming home. I said I was going on to the Middle East, and she goes, just stop running, and hung up the phone. And it was like this jarring moment, and I was like, oh my God, the jig's up. Somebody knows what's going on. And she was the one who had prescribed that I go to this therapist who just ripped me a new one. He was 29 years sober at the time, and he goes, look at your stomach, da da da. He's like, you're in the final stages of, alcoholism. You're about to die. I mean, laid me out. I'm like, I'm paying for this privilege. I'm like, I came for anxiety. You're not helping with that.
Right.
But he gave me what I need. I am a tough cookie, and he sized me up, but that's what kind of propelled me to run. But I needed to run. And that call from her, I needed to hear, just stop running, and identifying that she knew I was full of bullshit.
So, we kind of have been cross-talking and
I'm loving it.
going back and forth. But so you've painted a picture of what it looked like. And so was that your culminating event when she hung up the phone for you? Or did you go back? Tell me the...
Yeah, I came back, and I'll never... it was fantastic when I decided to come back. I got to Geneva, and I knew I was near the end, and I was like, put me in first class, and I was one of these cocoons, like beautiful little cocoons.
Swiss Air or something.
Yeah, and you're like, I can drink all the way to Boston. But I felt so safe because it was like the identifying had happened. Like the masks were coming off. Like I couldn't keep them on anymore. And I got into that little cocoon, and I slept so peacefully getting back to Boston. I didn't get sober. It was 2 months after I got back from there. Had to do a little bit more damage.
Yeah.
As a good
So what did
alcohol-
that look like? Tell us.
I had a lot of resentment towards someone significant in my life who didn't protect me on something. And I went to a party and blew that up. And he was very politically connected, very well heeled, and notable in the town of Boston. I had to out him as gay, doing all. It was not pretty.
Yeah, hurt people.
Yeah,
as you said.
I was an open sore, and I ripped through that. It was a 4th of July party, and to his credit, he forgave me. He was one of the amends that was really outstanding, and he was the consummate class act who. He has a place in my heart. He has passed due to some other issues medically wise. He just celebrated 4 years ago he passed, but he was like our little architect, and he was always our advocate and champion. And there was a group of 4 of us who really aligned around him. And he saw through. He knew, and it was funny. He goes, there was a hospital right outside of Boston, and he goes, go to McLean's, and he's like, and it was kind of like discarded me, like just
Right.
send him to McLean's, and I felt be gone. I was like, use my name and get me into McLean's, and I was like, I'll show you, and I had to tear up a couple more other places, but my rock bottom really came, and I went to a meeting in the small seaside town called Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I knew I was needing to go, and I went to an AA meeting at this Salvation Army, and it was funny. It was right downtown in this small little seaside community. And I knew a lot of people there. I had done a lot of damage there. And I was like hiding, like I'm in the bushes, like no one can see that I'm going in there. Like, mind you, like the night before I hurled a martini glass at someone at a very popular restaurant, and now I'm all worried about my appearance. But I went to that meeting, and I was honest and frank, and they gave me my big book that I have to this day.
I love
and I went a year later back, and it was the same. The day was the exact same feeling, and I was bawling. And they were like, just go, you can make it. Because I had bailed out on several treatment attempts, but there was just something when they say when you're sick and tired, you're sick and tired. And I got there, and I'll never forget. I got to Logan Airport to fly to. I went to Minnesota, and I took a picture of a drink, a Bloody Mary, and sent it to someone in my life. And I'm like, "This is my last drink." They're like, "Yeah, you're gonna have a few." And I was on the plane, and we were landing, and they were like, "Oh, we got to take your glass." I'm like, "I'm going to rehab," and they filled it up. But I'll never forget because I got to the jet bridge, and I was in the very first seat on the plane, and I was like, oh, well, I had the running tendencies, and I was like, well, they're expecting me in baggage claim. I'll hit a couple of bars before I go. And this, I think the therapist who worked with me, he was very well connected with this treatment center. They had people at the jet bridge, and they had my luggage. We were only parked like 10 minutes. Like, how did you know this was my luggage?
They know. They have us clocked.
Yeah. No, I mean, I got off and they're like, hello, Steve. And I was like, you're foiling my plan. But I still remember I got into the van, and
Where was this?
This was September in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay, Minnesota. All right.
And I called the last person left in my life, and I said, I made it. And she goes, good, now it's time to start living. And they took my phone. I'm sorry, it's these moments. I can be a tough cookie, but God, these hallmarks make you very emotional. And I don't remember that ride. It was like, I made it. And it was like, I remember when I got to the intake, and they're like, oh my God, you're so dehydrated, when they did like the tests and stuff. I'm like, I think I was like a 3.2 or 3.4, and I'm like, this is nothing. I'm like, I'm just getting started. If you really want to see a party, come on, let's get the bar card in. And they didn't prescribe to that, but
right, of course.
But treatment. When you were talking about the structure, I fought treatment the first couple of weeks, and I literally almost left once. And because of the intervention of some people close to me, they gave me the toughest therapist. Who was an ex-meth kingpin, Harley's Angel biker dude who was not putting up with my entitled shit. He knocked my ass out. Sorry.
Did it feel like a cocoon on Swiss Air?
No.
Right.
They ripped the Band-Aid off that one. But it was great. It was like a 500-acre campus. It was just what I needed to be extracted. Like, if I had gone to McLean's outside of Boston, I would have blown out of there in a heartbeat. Like, my house was 9 miles down the road. I'm like, oh, come on, I've got dinner reservations. Let's go.
Yeah.
And it was so therapeutic, but I fought, and they needed to give me the toughest SOB, and I packed my bags once. So this is fantastic. They had a transportation desk, and I was like, call me a car. I've got to get out of here. I know you're world renowned, but you don't know how to treat me. I'm unique. Mm-hmm. And I had my little leather bags, and the car service was coming, and this guy comes out, and it's like the red alert. Like, everyone from the CEO down was like, he's trying to escape. And they came out, and they're like, what's going on? I'm like, hey, you can refund me whatever I haven't used. And he goes, all I'll refund you miserable SOB, is your misery. Now get the hell out of here, unless you want to learn how to live. And that toughness, maybe it's not prescribed for everybody, but they knew how to read the audience, and this audience needed to be bitch slapped, frankly. Sorry.
Right. I went to the same type of place, and they were not nice, and they were nice to others, but I also fought, and I was put in the center of 30 people, and they all went around and said how they experienced me. Oh
yeah,
it was.
I had that same type of therapeutic approach.
Right. I call it confrontational therapy. I'm not sure if that's really a real term, but I've coined it, so you're welcome. Well. I really thought that I could tell you what to do because I knew what was best for you. But if you gave me feedback, I was like, no, honey, please. That's something for you, not for me.
Well, and you would be like, oh, that's cute. Yeah.
Kind of. And, I was unbearable and obstinate, and they made it clear that I was. And then at one point I just, the aha moment, I guess, when he told you, like, the only thing I'll refund you is your misery. I love that. And it's like, oh, that's all I'm going to get if I go this way.
Exactly.
But behind this closed door is a mystery.
Yeah. And that inner yearning to live. And that's when we're talking about structure. Like, I said to someone today, I was talking about the value of structure. And that's where, like, when we're talking about executive programs and different things, like, I personally am not the biggest advocate of those because I needed to be removed from my phone. Everything else, like, my universe had to become saving my life because I got to that literal jumping off point. If you're on a cliff or a balcony in Santorini looking at the Mediterranean wanting to jump, nothing really else really should matter in your life but saving your own life. When you've got that, I call it the window of willingness. That window opened. I didn't jump through it immediately, but I knew it was fleeting. And if I didn't jump, and if I didn't get all in, and if I didn't stay all in to this day, I'm toast.
Right.
And I mean, I've seen way too much death because people have reservations, and it's to their reservations. But that extraction from society helped me so much. Like, I bonded with myself and started, like, one of the biggest things I think that kept me from getting sober was I didn't think I deserved it. And the false narrative that was going on in my head, I'm like, I'm a persuasive negotiator, debater, and when I turn it inward, it is corrosive and toxic.
I know.
And I mean,
we can't talk to ourselves that way. Now, if ever, because, I'm a human being and it doesn't always sound peachy and amazing. I still, will talk to myself. And now what I've done is like, is that how I would talk to a 12-year-old girl? Is that how I would talk to a young girl? I have nieces and I have, adoptive nieces, I call them, because, they're my new family down in Florida. And I try to show up for these young kids as kind of a living amends to my real niece and nephew, who I was there in the beginning and then kind of, wasn't someone to count on. I drove drunk with them in the car,
Absolutely.
and thinking about that is like a huge regret, huge. But I wasn't any other place.
Absolutely. And it's so relatable. And that's where forgiving ourselves, like, I remember right before I was about to start my amends, I had flown back to New England, and I'm a big proponent of meetings on a daily basis. And I went to this meeting Sunday. I flew in, and it was not the best meeting, but I kept reading the St. Francis prayer. It's by forgiving that one is forgiven. And I kept focusing on, I'm like, oh my God, I haven't forgiven myself. And I'm like, and if I hadn't got that gift from the God of my understanding to know that knowledge before I went into those tenuous situations with offering amends, it would have been catastrophic. Like, I came in with a different posture, not to say that I absolved myself,
Of
but
course.
it was like, it was an opening salvo to say, hey, I'm worth being at the table. I'm worth having a conversation about how I can make this amends, not an apology, an amends. And it really was that evolution into really full manhood. I think it was like, I was willing to own my stuff.
I love that.
What a revelation.
But knowing also that you're a good person and you have, all the elements. It's that the alcohol was kind of hiding all of that and gave you this long-term self-sabotage narrative, that you can't do it right. And so you're going to not do it right. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy or something.
Yeah. Well, there was something that, I keep talking about this person who called that time in Greece, and someone else who has been really instrumental in my journey. She said something once that really hit it for me, and I think it's very relatable to other people struggling with addiction. It goes, if I made a mistake, I was the mistake. Like, and that's where I say, like, when our mutual friend said about I suffer from a disease of perception, all those underpinnings are still there. Some are kept at bay. Some have been somewhat eradicated, but they can flare. And I mean, that muscle reflex is strong.
It's so funny. I always say, like, you can get through your anxiety by meditating and praying and all this stuff. Last night I didn't sleep well and I was anxious today, and I'm like praying and meditating and walking around the office, and I'm just like, get it off me, like it was a fire. But it's funny how sometimes it flares, as you said, and it's just trying to remember that it's temporary.
Well, I would love to ask you a question about
Sure.
that. Is we talk about different forms of recovery, programs or mantras and different things. All these little phrases, like I said, completely nauseated me. Now I live by them.
Right.
Oh, God.
Well, they're so true. They're so real.
They are, but I heard early on the power of the pause, and especially for someone like you and I seem very similar in personalities. Like, there's not many fights that I'm not willing to show up for.
Right.
But for me to pause, that's an action unto itself. Sometimes taking no action is an action. And that was that took me so long to grasp, and it's these wonderful lessons.
For me too, and really working on that reactiveness for me was so hard. I think at one point my anger was getting the best of me when I was newly sober, and I shared a lot about it at a meeting that you and I both go to.
Absolutely.
And I feel like I wasn't I was just sharing about it, but not taking the action. And now today I can be like, wow, I've really changed, and I don't do the step that I would have normally done. I'm like,
Yeah,
this is amazing.
Or let things actually play out.
Right,
like,
right.
okay, I don't need to dip in, but you'll love an expression that saved me on a lot of things. It goes, I won't be punished for my anger. I'll be punished by my anger.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
I used to lash out, and then I'd be like, I feel guilty. I'm upset I did it. I feel like, it makes you feel horrible. But you've made the other person feel terrible too. And at first it might be like a power trip, but then it's just like the road to misery,
Well, it's like a drug. I
Yeah.
mean, like, I swear the endorphins come flying out. It's like, whew, look
Yeah.
at me. I still got it.
Yeah, but then it's like a crash landing,
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Hangover.
ecstasy where you feel so euphoric and so great, and then for the next 2 days you're like,
And I've got to make an amends.
yeah, and then that's the worst. I'm like, oh, and then I have to talk myself like you cannot get out of this. You have to do this. And I'm like, no, but I was right. No, but you weren't, So, sobriety has been quite a journey. But so tell me, so you had this amazing treatment experience and you go back to New England, you're making, was that in treatment? Did you get to learn about the 12 steps?
Yep, I definitely did. And I was the consummate debater, and I didn't actually go back to New England. I ended up coming to Florida because I had that desperation. I thought if I go back to the same people, places, and things, even though I thought Boston was missing me a lot, not really. I was still delusional.
Right.
I started to look at, they kept talking about all the milestones of sobriety and 12 steps, and I loved it. But then I was a debater. They were like, oh, there's a 5% success rate or a 95. Like, I kept poking holes, like, you're trying to get over on me. You're just trying to, get my money and do this. And, I debated with some of those therapists. I really owe a lot of amends to, because I crucified them. But I'd be like, well, this is a waste. Why am I spending X amount of dollars if I'm going to get a 5% return on my investment?
Oh,
They're
God.
like, no, that's if you do nothing. They're
Right.
like, if you do nothing, like, I couldn't see that. Like, I was still like, the fog had not completely
yeah.
lifted. But it did right before I left there. Like, and I was going to stay on for I went for the 30 days and I stayed a little bit longer. And then I was going to stay for another round. And then I'm like, no, I need to get out of this. I've got the training wheels, need to go. But I remember trying to rebook my flight, and I was in one of those kiosks, like a little phone booth. And I was like, oh my God, if I go home, I die. It overwhelmed, like, that intervention. And I don't know if you know the passage, Footprints in the Sand. It talks about God kind of carrying you when you thought they were nowhere there. Even though I was not feeling God at the time, it was like God intervening, like, don't go home.
Right.
And I came out of this little phone booth, and they had computers that we could use. And my friend from rehab, who was still my friend today, I was like, Jay, I can't go back. I'll die if I go back to Boston. He goes, I'm going to Delray Beach. It's the recovery capital of the world. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'd come to Florida for all of my years of growing up. And I'm like, Delray is like a party town. I'm like, you're delusional.
There's two sides.
Yeah. He's like, no, there's like 400 meetings a day. And I was like, okay, I got nothing going on. I might as well go to Florida, because they offered me to stay in Minneapolis in the winter. I'm like, sorry, I got
don't think
standards.
so.
They're low, but I've got them, and I'm not staying in the dead of
Right.
winter. Florida, Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I know people who have stayed, and they loved it, but
Well,
I wasn't doing that.
It's funny because you looked at Delray that way. I looked at New York. People were like, no, but there's so much recovery in New York City. I'm like, what are you talking about? All of this is drinking. And meanwhile, there's like hundreds of meetings and many places to go and all this stuff. But I wasn't in that crowd. I wasn't utilizing those things. I didn't even think that was like nothing pointed me in that direction ever. And everything pointed me into the direction of more liquor, more.
Absolutely.
So, I want to know, and, I know it changes throughout sobriety, but like, what did you need then to stay sober? And then how did that transition through the years? And then what do you need now?
Sure, that's a great question. Like, what I needed then was structure and accountability and community. I mean, I think, and that's where landing in Delray Beach, actually my friend who I thought I was kind of come here with ended up going, Hazleton has a property on the west coast of Florida in Naples, and he had last minute followed a girl there, and I came here. I'm like, okay, great, I'm here by myself. And I got introduced to the clubhouse that is near and dear to my heart and yours, I think. That I went there the first day I was here in Florida, and they actually had a gay and lesbian meeting, and someone's like, I think you might like this meeting. I'm like, what gave it away, my fabulousness? And I found a community of people, of like-minded people, and that opened up. And it sounds like a cliche when I went back the next day, or the next week, and someone remembered my name. It was earth-shattering to me, because I was like, I had pummeled myself, and I was like, someone might want to get to know me, like they care enough to remember my name. I mean, I equate the first year of sobriety like an astronaut on re-entry. You're being jostled around the fuselage, or a stroke victim. Like, I had to learn how to walk, talk, like go places, experience life. And I was so fragile that I thought if I laughed that I would shatter. Like I just was like a open sore. And it was the loving of a community that allowed me to redefine my life, not get my old life back, just get a whole, I mean, there's elements, and I cherish my old life. I mean, it has turned into an asset. All of those issues and backstories and issues with my
Hurling
family.
martinis at people. Yeah.
I mean, they might not see it as an asset, but it has turned into an asset.
But it is, because that's not the person you are today. But I think without those experiences and those crazy actions, we wouldn't be able to really see the drastic, desperate need that we need to do this, and we need to do it every day.
Well, and one of the things is, I like the comedy and the fun, and the we can amp it up and really show the comedy of it, but I take this deadly seriously. So when you talk about like the trajectory of what I needed then and what I need now is to stay in the center. Because if I get too big for my britches, I'm toast. And I know it. And I've seen it. I mean, like, so many people have walked the path, including my first sponsor, who had some life events that took place. It became chaotic in his life, and he opted to pick up, and we still remain friends. I moved on to another sponsor, but he succumbed to this disease, and he's become my guardian angel, because I don't take anything for granted. I mean, there's been probably 3 instances that I've almost picked up because of life events. Life just served me up a gut punch here and there, and and that's where that power of the pause. Like, there was one time where I was like, I literally had to almost like lock myself in my house, because I was like, if I go to Atlantic Avenue, watch out, South Florida. This bundle of fun's going to turn into a nuclear plume over Palm Beach County, and no one's going to enjoy it very much. And I did that. I stayed in my house. It was someone that happened on a Friday night, and couldn't get any answers over the weekend. I stayed put. I connected with my sober support, and I went to a meeting, and I shared authentically. And that's where I think that authenticity is really what I need. That's why I recoil from bullshit artists, because I live so much of my life with bullshit and people who were manipulative. I was manipulative too. Now I can spot it so far away. It's like, don't get off the starting gate with me.
Yeah.
Do yourself a service and do me a service. Yeah.
I'll never forget, actually, I shared at that meeting that we go to, and I had a few years sober, and I shared about how I was struggling at the time. And someone came up to me after, and they go, you have a few years sober. You shouldn't be sharing about struggling. You should be carrying the message of hope.
God.
And I said, I hope to never be that person.
Yeah.
I want to always share about struggling, because I struggle. And I also have so much hope and amazing things around me. But there are those struggles too. And without those, I can't grow even, So I feel like things present themselves to me, and it's like, okay, how am I going how am I going to do this? Am I going to do it the sober way, or am I going to do it the Irene way?
Absolutely.
You know?
We know how that script runs.
Yeah, I need to get out of my own way or not stay in here too much, you know, and just do the next.
And make it the rooms work for what they're intended to. And I mean, I prescribe to the same methodology as yourself. Like, I have had that apprehension, like, oh, well, you know, people might get the wrong idea, you know, or if I'm saying I'm in a bad place or something. But then they see the vulnerability. Like, you know, I let the rooms. I'm a selfish alcoholic who hasn't had a drink in almost a decade, but my mind still goes cray cray, and I need to get some of that up. And to have that opportunity, and I love the morning meetings, but I love all meetings. There's always something to be had in them. But if I just go there to check the box, like, I think one step is the actual process. Like, I love Zoom during COVID. I need the physicality.
I'm not a huge Zoom meeting person.
I mean, it serves for each his own.
Yeah,
but this is it's my recovery, and I own the responsibility of it. And, you know, I think having that, I think the person does need to see, God, he's got 10 years and he may look like he's got it together, but no, he needs this just as much today, if not more today than I did, at least when I was in treatment or in that first year. Like, I was very fortunate. My first year of sobriety, I had the means to, my job was to stay sober. I didn't have to go back into my old chaotic life. I didn't have to.
No stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and that's what, it was funny. A dear friend of ours, Tony, who was one of the founders of that clubhouse that we know, he's got many years of sobriety, 96 and still going, and he equates it to the program. I made a commitment.
He's incredible.
Oh, he is. He's something to aspire to, that's for sure. But he's human like the rest of us, has some frailties, and I mean, he's just been so instrumental, and he gave me one of the best gifts in the world. One time when I was trying to decide if I was going to stay down here or go home, and the building was closed, and I went to visit him, and he's always helped me during times of turbulence, and he took us into that room that we meet in, and there's a sign that says, "To thy own self be true." He goes, "You get that right, you can navigate anything, but you've got to go to a meeting every day because it serves as your rudder of the day." And it was such a wonderful gift because it's so true. Like, if someone wants to call me a liar or bullshit artist, I know my inside truth. But before I got sober, everything was, if you thought I was successful, I was successful. If you thought I was a liar, I was a liar. Like, I couldn't like that when they talk about the chameleon and all the stuff, like, to shed away all that BS. You know, like, I'm not going to be liked by everybody. That's I'm not responsible for that.
Right.
I'm responsible to show up, hopefully carry a message of hope, and show that you can go literally to the brink of death and come back.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've heard tremendous stories that blow mine away. But what I think of when we talk about bottoms, you know, like, I love an expression that goes, your bottom's when you stop digging, but there's always a trap door. So our bottoms may all look so different, but the feelings are always the same. And everyone who has struggled with addiction, it doesn't matter if it's gambling, sex, eating, alcohol, drugs, that feeling of despondency and hopelessness, and you need that hand to pull you back up and say, we can make it through together. That is one of the most intoxicating things I think I've ever seen, is to see the light come on in someone. I mean, it blows any rail of Coke or, vodka soda.
It's so
and
true.
doesn't have a hangover.
So true. I mean, I have chills with just you saying that, because it is so true. And I would never, just like you said, it showed you a whole new life, kind of. I never aspired for this life ever. I think I aspired to be like that old, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie 54. It's about Studio 54 and that old woman who like is dancing till her death kind of thing. I really aspired to be that woman. I was like, I am going to be that woman who parties her entire life. I'm going to be the alcoholic, the this, the that, and I'm going to be the crazy one with the funny hair and the this, that. And it's like, I love zero chaos today. I want none of that. I don't even like, it's just so different. And I am so much happier with, this life. And this is the life I want. And I actually can do it with all the tools that have been presented to me. And I'm around an amazing group of people.
Absolutely. Well, and freedom. And
a sense of peace.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny. I was thinking of a doctor today I used to go to. He studied the iris of the eyes, and he'd be like, "Oh, you need to do this," and he'd do colonics, and never asked me how much I drank. I always found that funny. Like you can study all this stuff and know that I'm anemic in here, and clean me and cleanse me, but then send me off with $1,000 worth of supplements, but never asked like what's really the root problem is the gallon of vodka I put in my body a day. But when I think of the opportunities of the freedom of not being held hostage to drugs and alcohol, but I always say to anyone I work with, or even quite openly in the meeting, or any potential people who would ever entertain wanting to get sober, it's work. If someone does not tell you, I mean, I like when someone's a straight talker and says, you know what, this is work, but it's so worth it, and not like what I thought the promises would be, like to get the peace of mind that I tried to buy, manipulate, and go all over the earth to find. All I had to do is some simple work, like put the booze down, do a little work about getting honest and becoming true to myself. And the benefits, I couldn't have scripted what the promises would look like. Like to be able to sleep decently, not know that I haven't screwed anyone over, is really just such a sense of peace. Like, do I have hard times, tough times? 100%.
Yeah. Let's talk about like all the things you need to do today. You stay in the center, go on a little bit more about that, and maybe what you would recommend.
Sure.
Like if you could give people a good message, like what would you recommend? Yeah, because it is hard. We were talking about how hard the work is, because it's real work.
Well, and I think that's where we left off, was about the work and the message that the work is worth it, because you get the opportunity to go on a process of discovery of yourself and empowerment, becoming a better person in the community. Like I'm big on the community, because especially that's why I'm so protective of the recovery community here in Delray, but Palm Beach County, or in general, is the fact that they've given me a new lease on life, and had the opportunity, but with the price of admission that I've got to give back. Like if I'm a thief of AA and say, oh well, I got the message, good luck to you all, then I'm not being a good member of the community, and I will lose it. And I am selfish. I want what I've worked hard for and to maintain. And with that comes the responsibility of being compassionate. And, I look at the people who are so putting themselves through the ringers, and it doesn't, like we were talking earlier, someone I most identified was a streetwalker from Harlem that, 15 years previously, I was told I would never live a life like that. I was living exactly the life, not prostituting myself or other things, but the feelings were the same. And if you can be the hand to empower someone to look beyond what they have cast for themselves as the die of their life, and give them a little step up to say, hey, you're worth being listened to. Compassion is not overrated. And especially in this polarized world of, Snapchat and, all these, different sensory overloads, like to have someone have a human connection, I think that's the biggest message for me, is the thing that keeps me sober and keeps me wanting to strive for more is the human connection. Like being vulnerable with the people that I love, be it loved ones, just people, just even like a knowing hello. Like I may never see them again, but that's the first impression will bring them back, hopefully, to save their own life, because it's a we program, but I've got to do it. And you'll hear from me a lot is about authenticity. If you see one Steve in the rooms, or being a member of the community, then being a jackass out in the community, like the two can't live separated. Like I have found an alignment with myself, love me or hate me, that I don't ever want to give up. Does it sway every once in a while? Yeah, there's never a perfect pendulum, but I think the recipe for me at this time is having that alignment and being true to myself, but being in action. And a lot of people say, oh, you do too much, or, are you running again? That I've heard that from some people. And I'm like, I'm running because I feel like I'm making up for at least a decade of my life that I felt like a waste of resources sitting on the sideline of life. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be that 70-year-old with Alzheimer's care in a nursing home like my father. That's not up to me. But I'm in the day, like being present in my life and where my feet are at, is the greatest gift I could have ever thought of. Because I tried to run from anything that had to do with reality. And now I'm comfortable in reality.
I love that. Yeah. You're such an eloquent speaker.
Oh,
You
thank
really
you.
are. I don't know if you need to write a book or
Well,
do something.
you know what? I do have a title if I do write a book.
Oh,
because
tell me.
it was fuck inferiority. Because I felt so inferior to everything and everybody in my life that if I ever go down that road again, it will absorb me. And that's where I think if I bring that to any people that I interact with in this community or any community I get to be the privilege of being part of, is that if I'm a voice to say, you know, they may see an aesthetic and think, oh, he's got the, you know, and it's like, no, I'm like that streetwalker in Harlem. You know, we have not walked the same path, but we have walked the same path.
Yeah.
You know, and
desperation,
Yeah.
hollow. I always describe my end of like kind of the last 2 years of me using is I felt hollow.
Yeah.
I felt like I was a ghost walking through New York City, driving through New York City, having interactions with people that were completely not memorable. You know, I remember we thought we were so profound and we thought we were so like connected and spiritual and we're so, you know, and it was nothing like that.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that those people would miss me so much. They don't.
No.
They've moved on. They've moved on to the next victim, you know, and by no means was I a victim. Don't get me wrong. I know I said that in a way that it sounded that way because I chose that. I wanted that. I've chased it actually. And now I chase my sobriety and you know, there are the ebbs and flows.
Absolutely.
And there's the days that I don't show up 100% perfect or I've given someone the other day, not to mention names, but I may have been a little rude or, you know,
You looked right at me when you said that.
anxious. I was really dealing with my own anxious moment. I'm doing my makeup in the mirror and I'm saying, don't go out there. Don't go out there. Just continue to be in your own, you know, just manage your own life right now.
You went out there.
Oh, I had to go out there and I was like, we are not ready or we're not going to be. And he was like, you do you. and I needed to hear that. And then everything was perfect and not according to 𝗣𝗐𝗀's plan. It was actually perfect. And I turned around to him and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You know, because we have those moments.
Absolutely. It makes us human.
Yeah, or if I am like that to a stranger or rude, I always have to look back and be like, well, okay, what's really going on right now? Why is this happening? Why am I treating someone less, you know, what is really going on? And we have these moments, but recognize them as soon as possible.
Oh, sure. No, when we were talking about, you know, having those moments of just being a human and having a, you know, maybe a terse reaction, and then we honestly say that with sober supports or with a sponsor, and they're like, you know, it usually is a jumping off point to a greater conversation that offers up, you know, more insight. Like that's what I think really does keep me around, is the amount of learning that I do on a daily basis. Like, there is no graduation from this. Like, I've been learning stuff on a daily basis ever since I got sober, because it's like the plaque buildup keeps getting like extricated from my body because, or the calluses. Like, hey, let's. I might not be ready to unearth this right now, but a year from now I will be. And you know, the journey has been really what's kept me around, I think.
It's exciting too. Like, kind of, I used to look at it and look at my future with a bit of a kind of Eeyore perspective, like a stormy cloud above me. And now I'm kind of like, oh, I'm excited. Like, what's next? And it might be some struggles and it might be something exciting, but I'm still excited to experience it.
Absolutely.
And not to numb it and not to, you know, take away the full life experience. And I also think that just the self-awareness I've gained. And you know, I used to say to people, as you get older, you grow a layer of I don't give a fuck or shit. I don't give a shit.
I like the first one, but it might be edited out.
I thought when I was in my 20s, I thought, oh my God, 39, 40, it's worst. Oh, I'm going to be so old now that I'm, these have been the best years of my life, actually. And I've grown this layer of like, of course, I don't want to upset anyone purposely or any of that. But like, I've also grown this layer of like, if you don't like me, it's okay. I'll be okay. And you'll be okay.
Well, that's what I say. I was at this lunch I was at today. They were like, "Oh, as you get older, like you," and I was like, "I'm not getting older, honey. I'm getting more seasoned." And I go, "This works for me. It's my reality."
I agree. I love the whole journey. I'm really loving the whole journey, and it looks like you are too, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
And just that, again, the accountability around us, and also to be able to like, now I feel like I can call you even and say
absolutely.
like, I could have before, I know that, but now on a deeper level, I feel like I can call you and be like, I'm having one of those in my head days,
Well, and it's amazing how it's funny. I use an acronym for God: gratitude over drama.
I love that.
Yeah, I can ratchet up the drama side pretty well. I've got to quell it with a little gratitude, and it's amazing how quickly gratitude does reset me because. We all have feelings and like that, but there's one person who I've known throughout my whole entire time down here. We run into each other. There's no coincidences. Like when we both are like a little bit mousy in our head or squirrely in our head, we just seem to randomly we'll run into each other in Palm Beach Gardens or, like Fort Lauderdale, or happen to go to the same meeting where we haven't been to for 2 years. We're like, I really needed to see you today. And it's like those that's where, there's something I'm just recycling what I heard in the room. It's like the opposite of addiction is connection. And if there's any recipe for success for anyone, whatever their struggles are, if they get connected in a supportive community, you can navigate absolutely anything. I mean, I've seen people go through divorce, death, bankruptcy, loss of a child, things that you'd never think that someone could walk through. They've walked through with pretty good grace, and it was all attributed to connection, in my opinion.
And not picking up a drink or a drug.
Keeping it simple. It's hard for us alcoholics to keep it simple.
Believe it or not, I think it is hard. And
because I'm good at chaos.
But I don't want chaos anymore.
Yeah.
I really don't. Like even in my relationship, I don't yell anymore. We're calm. Like if he says something,
we need to hang out some more. I need some of that.
Yeah. If he says something to bother me, I actually now walk away, go to the bathroom or something. Then I come back and I'm like, actually, that kind of bothered me. I'm like, who am I? Like who is this person? But it's incredible. Like
restraint of pen and tongue. Ooh, that's a concept.
Well,
thank God for draft.
Exactly. So what else could you probably give some other shreds of, besides that it's hard work but worth it?
Oh yeah, that's it.
And the community and connection.
But be willing to go on the journey. I mean, and the fact that the relationships, like nothing's going to be on your time schedule. Like if you burnt bridges or there's relationships that have been taken out of my life that I never thought I'd be able to overcome, but they needed to for me to survive. And it's like there was a wonderful that character by Tyler Perry, Medea, and she talked about like friends and families as like a tree. Like there's leaves that will come in and go and blow with the wind, branches that will break, stay around a little bit longer, but the roots will keep that tree stout and survive any storm. Find your root, find your anchor. That like I had the privilege of having that one anchor, that one person who believed in me, was in my corner, and they took a lot of crap for having to stand by me, but it was the power of two alcoholics or two addicts speaking to one another is transformative. It can beat anything in this world.
Okay. So the last thing I want to ask you really is if you could say something to your younger self, what age would you choose to speak to yourself at, and what would you say?
What a great question. Oh my God.
We try here at Crosstalk.
That one's good. What age would I communicate with myself? I would say 7 or 8, and be like, celebrate yourself and be true to yourself, and don't let the world consume you. just navigate it with grace. I think
Awesome. I love that. I love that. Anything else that maybe you didn't share that you want to share?
There was one thing that I wrote down. I love my little notes, but there was, and I anyone who knows me knows I love the sayings. But when we talk about like the grays, like my sponsor said, you know, when the first year is like black or white, drink, don't drink, and then navigate the grays is what we work as we progress. You know, we get you stabilized, then we figure out how to manage the grays. And one thing that he and I used to say as a little mantra, he goes, this program's not designed to keep you from the rain, it's to teach you how to dance in the rain. And I'm going to keep dancing.
I love that. Thank you so much. I'm so happy you came, and I'm so happy that you're so candid and alive. I just love this energy. I need you in my life every day.
Well, okay.
We have
guess
to-
what?
we have to
I'm
arrange-
here. We're part of the same
Yeah,
community.
exactly. And let's have a hug.
Yeah.
Around.
Oh, I love it. They're authentic, nice and tight.
So much.